Hi, guys. Thanks for joining me, and welcome to episode 2 of The Drank Debate. I'm Caden Drank, and I hope you guys enjoy. So, today I wanted to talk more in depth about the left, the progressives and liberals of the country, and their current strategies on the gun issues that I discussed in my previous episode, and I'll link that in the description if you guys want to go check that one out. I wanted to start by talking specifically about celebrities and the familiar Hollywood figures that we all know, and how they tend to have political influence, specifically how they funded things like the March for Our Lives and other similar events. For example, Oprah Winfrey, George Clooney, and Steven Spielberg, all three of these familiar Hollywood powerful figures, donated $500,000, $500,000 each to fund the March for Our Lives. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think George Clooney's role in Ocean's 11 gives him political credibility or any reason to try and sway us on where we should place our votes as Americans. But as annoying as it is to hear from these movie stars and other Hollywood figures about what we should do politically and where we should stand, that's not my biggest issue. My biggest issue is the people the left is using as their pawns, or the people that are gaining political influence based on certain issues. And the five people I wanted to bring up, if you guys saw our recent Time magazine cover, it showed five Parkland students. Again, back to the Parkland mass shooting in Florida. It showed five students that survived it, and those students were Jacqueline Corin, Alex Wind, Cameron Kasky, and of course the ringleaders Emma Gonzalez and David Hogg. They got the cover of this issue of Time magazine. Now, most people would only recognize those last two names, and that's because those are the only two people that have really gained political influence or become pawns for the left in pushing their agenda. So why take a picture of the five of them? That's just something I wanted to discuss. Why the five? Well, the left wants this to be seen as a movement rather than just the ideas of two young people or two people in general. The left wants it to be seen as a big group of young people, and this is actually a very powerful difference, is showing one or two or the entire group of five. It seems like a movement of young people pushing an entire agenda rather than one or two people asking for change. It's such a powerful image, even though two of them are the only two of them are really doing anything in the actual political spotlight. And those two, of course, are David Hogg and Emma Gonzalez. So I wanted to talk first about Hogg and why I have issues with him. One example is his credibility is just awful. He's absolutely butchered it on so many accounts, and the fact that he's still in the political spotlight and still getting interviews almost appalls me. That's just the left's ignorance of credibility in the country. The Democrats completely ignoring credibility. One example of him completely butchering his own credibility is the fact that he can't seem to remember where he was when the first shots were fired in Parkland in the school. In one case, and this was on an interview with CBS, and I'm going to quote, he says, "On the day of the shooting, I got my camera, I got on my bike, and I rode as fast as I could 3 miles from my house to the school to get as much video and to get as many interviews as I could because I knew that this could not be another mass shooting." And there's a few reasons I have a problem with this. One, the shots had already been fired, the tragedy did occur, and he said he knew this could not be another mass shooting. That doesn't make any sense. It was. And another thing, he wasn't at school, and he doesn't really declare why. He doesn't say that he was sick or anything, and that's not really the big issue. It just kind of seems a little sketchy that he doesn't, declare where he was. But I didn't really have a problem with that and most of you probably don't until you hear this. When he interviewed a completely separate interview, with this one being with Time magazine, he says, and I'm quoting again, "I was in my AP Environmental Science class when the first gunshot rang out." So which is it? Were you at home and you heard about the tragedy and you wanted to go make a difference, whatever it be, and rode your bike from home to the school to get interviews and video? Or were you at school in your class suffering the tragedy with your classmates, and then you ended up going outside and taking interviews? So whether he has amnesia or just plainly can't remember, or he's flat out lying, which I believe he is, it just destroys his credibility. He's talking about where he was at the time of the shots. That's not a difficult thing to remember. This isn't something where his story should change. Were you at home or were you at school? It makes any argument that he kind of portrays to us a void, because he's not able to discuss the beginning of the story. Then why should the end make any sense to any of us? He throws out his entire argument. And another problem I have with Hogg would just be his hypocrisy. I'm going to go into hypocrisy. He talks about how the Second Amendment falsely protects certain guns like AR-15s, the target gun of the entire movement, even though there's so many other options that are equally as dangerous, and ARs don't even account for a small percentage of murders with guns throughout the U.S. But another issue is the clear backpack issue. Now, the Florida school district where his school exists has proposed one solution, being clear backpacks. Students wear backpacks that are invisible or see-through, so that what they bring into school is well known. If somebody sees something dangerous, it's easier to call out, or easier to notice and stop before it happens. Well, Hogg hates this solution. And the funny thing to me is when he was on stage at the March for Our Lives and in interviews with several news companies, in the interview with Time and with other on-air interviews, he said that this is a violation of his constitutional rights to be forced to wear a clear backpack at school. Well, he didn't declare which constitutional right that was. I kind of looked into it. I looked at the different amendments and I looked into the Constitution and figured it would fall into the Fourth Amendment. And I agree that the clear backpack solution is not the way we should go. And the reason I think it falls into the Fourth Amendment is because that would be the search and seizure amendment, that authority figures such as police officers or government officials or whoever it may be cannot search or seize any private property without probable cause and in many cases a warrant. So, or it may be even the First Amendment, your free speech, what you choose to wear, whatever it may be. But there's no direct constitutional guarantee that you in school should not be forced to follow a code of what your backpack has to look like, whether that be clear or whatever. What the Constitution does guarantee you, and before the Fourth Amendment, the Second Amendment, and they're in order for a specific reason. The Second Amendment guarantees us the right to bear arms and says that shall not be infringed. So which is it, Hogg? Is it you don't want your constitutional rights infringed upon, or do you want the Second Amendment infringed upon? You got to make up your mind. His credibility's out the window. Every argument he's made, he's either contradicted, lied about, or just completely torn apart because he's so hypocritical. So that's really the extent of my problem with the arguments that Hogg's made. I wanted to talk about the other of the two figures, Emma Gonzalez. And she's a different story. She started out as the quieter of those two pawns, but she's recently begun to emulate Hogg. She's gained a lot of political influence. She's kind of risen up in the past couple weeks. Like, she was on stage at the March for Our Lives. She's done other rallies, and she's even been in other news interviews. Why is the left pushing Gonzalez as the second pawn if Hogg is getting so many interviews and actually started out as the most powerful of all the kids? Gonzalez is being pushed because she offers different things. One, she's a female. She's a woman, and having those polar opposites in an argument strengthens it. The left knows how to play to people's emotions and play to the mind and make you see it as a movement rather than just an agenda. That's what they're doing. Another thing, she offers a backup plan to Hogg. I honestly feel like, and a lot of other people too, that Hogg is destroying his entire argument, his credibility, and that if he completely goes under, the movement doesn't. Because they have people like Gonzalez. If they didn't have Gonzalez and even the other three people that were in that picture on Time Magazine pushing the same agenda, and Hogg went under, it would almost destroy the credibility of the entire issue. But it doesn't, because they have her and other people as backups. Another reason they push her and that she's gaining so much influence is she pushes a much broader political agenda. Hogg is really pushing the pertinence of gun issues, and so is Gonzalez, but she speaks more to an entire political system. My example to her was, that I also discussed slightly in my last video, was on her sleeve at the March for Our Lives, and in other cases, she's worn the flag of Cuba. She's even sported the hammer and sickle. She's other communist symbols. So she's pushing these policies in a country that offers more opportunity, liberty, and freedom than any other. And that's kind of where I have issues with her. Cuba is a country that struggled economically for decades. In fact, millions fled, a lot of them to the United States, after Fidel Castro came to power. These regimes haven't changed. Their political systems haven't changed. And if you look into the economic policies and the economic state of Cuba, the only reason that their country hasn't gone under completely is because of tourism from countries like the United States. If you took tourism out of their economic state, they would be struggling a lot more than they already are. So enough about Cuba, and actually, another reason they're so economically sound, and they're not even sound, but that they are where they are, is because of drug involvement and cartels. But why should we model a country like this where people flee and starve? They still have immigration issues. More people leave than come in for good reason. Nobody, and the United States has never had that happen. It's actually been an influx constantly for centuries. But why should we model this country or any country that's been communist? She's verbally pushed socialist policies. Why should we model socialism? So that's my biggest problem with Gonzalez, is the way she's pushing this broad political agenda that could completely dismantle the beauty of the United States. And I'm not so much in fear that these policies are going to take over, that this viewpoint is going to become the basis of our government. It bothers me that these people don't educate themselves on actual international cases of where these policies have succeeded and failed, because communism fails. It always has. And in every case, developed nations around the world have become more democratic, or even republics. So why would somebody wanting to instill democratic change in a democratic nation model the symbol of such a nation? And it's not just her. Many of the people that she's giving speeches to and talking to, and that are a part of her movement, are calling for complete and utter dismantling of the Second Amendment. They're calling for restrictions to free speech because their feelings are more important than facts. In fact, one of my favorite quotes, if and many of you might know him, Ben Shapiro, "Facts don't care about your feelings." They don't. But they're calling for restrictions to free speech. Many of them actually call for the abandonment of the law of our land, the document that led our great nation into becoming the land of opportunity, the land of the free. Emma Gonzalez herself actually had a video that she posted and went almost viral and was on several news stations, of her holding the Constitution, tearing it in two, the document that ironically guarantees her the right to do that without persecution from the government. But I just wonder what's going on and how privileged these people can be, because they're marching. They're so uneducated because they're marching and they're fighting and they're asking a government to take away some of their rights. You live in a very free nation. You have the right to speak your mind. You have all of these rights guaranteed, and this was almost pioneered by the Constitution. Many other nations later followed. But they're asking for some of these rights to be taken away, and these are rights that many of the people around the globe would die for and still do die for in developing nations. So that's my biggest problem right now with the pawns of the left. So what does this really mean for conservatives or people on the other side? Well, myself and news organizations, larger voices, are focused in on these liberal policies and these liberal and progressive actions that are being taken. What does this mean for conservatives? Well, conservatives have always, throughout American history, been on the silent side. We've always seen leftist ideals being marched down Washington, D.C., and in other big cities like L.A., Chicago, and New York. We've always seen it. It's happened. The 1960s, there were marches against the Vietnam War, which is typically supported more by conservatives and opposed by liberals. It's always been this way, that the liberal voice is the one that's got the microphone, got the megaphone, and the conservative voice is only shown at the polls. And that's not always a bad thing. And conservatives being the more quiet of the two, that's not a bad thing. But right now, conservatives need a voice. Right now, with the immense power and influence that the left is having, they need to speak up. Conservatives need to speak up. And it goes beyond just voting, but the biggest thing currently, especially for me, is voting. And I'll get into what needs to happen in a second, but why has it always been this way? Why have liberals always had the loud voice and the more powerful image when it comes to news and just kind of screaming their voice out to the rest of the American people? Why have conservatives stayed quiet? Well, typically it's fear, and not necessarily like being fearful of the other side, but fearing that you're going to be out-screamed, or that you're going to get critiqued, and that you don't have enough support in in what you say. And this happens a lot in high schools. I live in California. My high school is typically more liberal, and it is really hard for me. And I'm not somebody who sits back. I'm somebody who actually will stand up and speak my opinion. I'm somebody who will stand up for the conservative side of things. But it's difficult. It really is. And for people, even more introverted people, it becomes really difficult. So I wanted to give examples of where this has actually occurred, both past and present. One recently is the Laura Ingraham issue. Laura Ingraham, she runs her own show on Fox News, I believe the Ingraham Angle, and she recently critiqued David Hogg, saying he didn't get into certain UC schools because he was rejected by several, and he didn't get in because his GPA was good, but it wasn't stellar. It was a 4.1, I believe, and he didn't get in. And she was critiquing this, saying, listen, he claims the left pushes him as this smart, young, powerful kid. He's not that great. He's outshined by a lot of people, which is true. I currently hold a 4.7 GPA. I think my average is around 4.35, 4.4, and I'm outshined by a lot of people. So Hogg is not so stellar. Anyway, she was called out on this issue because he's a kid and she needs to be more sensitive. She apologized, which to me is the biggest issue. She shouldn't have, but she apologized, and the reason she shouldn't have apologized is because right after she said, you know what, I'm sorry, I should have stepped back. No, Laura, you shouldn't have, because you stepped back, you were pounced on. Hogg came out and said, well, I don't accept your apology, and it was and because Hogg attacked her, so it was rhetorically powerful. He did it well, and the left began to attack Ingraham, and a lot of her ads and a lot of the companies that support her show and run commercials are pulling their ads. They're pulling their commercials, and she's making less money, and the show's going to struggle, and that's only because she stepped back. She shouldn't be afraid to share this opinion. Hogg has lied. Many liberals are lying. They're caught being hypocritical, but they don't step back, and that's honestly powerful. Laura should not have. Another example, this being in the past, during the election of 1968, of what an example of conservatives being silent. This is an example where it didn't really hurt the conservatives, but during the 1968 election, it was Republican Richard Nixon. It was Nixon versus the Democrat Humphrey, and Humphrey. He had the support of all these young liberals, the hippies, the people that were marching. But he didn't win. Nixon won by actually a very large margin. Humphrey lost. And Nixon was actually the first person to coin the term silent majority. Trump used it a lot during his campaign. A lot of Republicans have used it on smaller scales, such as Congress, even city elections, that the conservatives are the silent majority of the region. Nixon coined it, and it became a very popular term to describe what happened in that election. The whole what happened issue was just as big then as it is now with Hillary. And she was expected to win. You watch any news projection, even a lot of Fox's news projection, the biggest, typically more conservative news station out there, Hillary had the advantage. But the silent majority pulled through. Conservatives are always the silent group, and that again isn't always bad. But the left has hit the ground running. They have momentum right now, and there are a lot of things conservatives need to do. One, they need to vote. You look at some of the smaller elections in congressional regions, like the one in Alabama where the Democrat won, and there was the whole scandal. Which, if it happened, I'm glad he lost. If not, I don't know yet, but it needs to be investigated. Not the point. In Pennsylvania, the Republican, we just lost the election, the congressional election in Pennsylvania, in regions that Trump won by 20 points, 20%. These are regions that Trump was able to pull with huge numbers, and there's a reason for that. Trump, regardless of his rhetorical flaws, regardless of the mistakes he's made, was able to pull so many people to the polls that had never voted or that hardly voted. And that was so powerful. And these other Republicans just aren't able to do it, and Republicans and conservatives are not voting. People need to get up. People need to vote. I don't care how liberal your area is or how conservative. In California, if you're a Republican, vote it. If you're conservative, vote it. If you're in a large city that's typically liberal, vote. Please, it's your civic duty. If you're in a very Republican stronghold, a conservative stronghold, and you're conservative, still vote, because you not voting gives them an advantage. One stay home is a vote for the left. So We can't be doing that when the left is getting all these young, especially 18 to 25s, and the people that are becoming 18. Most of my age group, I'm 17, turning 18 in January. So in the coming elections, the young groups that are typically liberal are becoming very powerful. So you need to vote. Another thing, you need to share your voice a little bit more. And it's difficult for conservatives in a lot of areas. It really is. But whether that be just posting social media, if you're younger like I am, or even younger than me watching and you're really interested in politics, discuss with your classmates, discuss with teachers. Don't outright. Don't be as dogmatic or use ad hominem flaws as they do, which would be attacking them for their views. But discuss your viewpoint. Ask why they support what they support, and then explain why you support what you support. Know their argument better than they do, and discuss. People need to show their views, and that's really hurt conservatives a lot. And whether that be social media, even though a lot of it's censored on larger scales, you can still share your opinion. If it be a podcast like this one, if it be you simply voting or discussing with your family, conservatives just need to share their voice, and that would be really powerful. So I know this kind of went all over the place, but that's kind of where I'm gonna close this one. So again, I wanted to thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please like it, subscribe to the channel, share it with friends and family, do whatever you can, and that would mean a lot to me. So yeah, I'm gonna be posting pictures about this on my Instagram, which is just going to be the Drank Debate, where you'll be able to find it. I'll have an email in the description, or you could just comment. I'll read both. Either way, whether you liked it, disliked it, what you agreed with, don't agree with, questions, comment, concerned, anything, topics you want me to discuss in future videos. I'm going to try and do them every week or just about, and get them up as much as I can. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I'm Caden Drank. This is the Drank Debate, and hopefully I'll see you next time.